The average American will pay over $400,000 in interest during their lifetime. Not on their house, not on their car, just interest. Money paid for the privilege of having borrowed money in the first place. Most of that interest comes from debt they were told was unavoidable. Some of it comes from debt they were told was smart. And a disturbing amount comes from debt that compounds so quietly they didn't notice until it was already too late. Here's what nobody tells you about debt. It's not actually one thing. It's a spectrum, and where your debt falls on that spectrum determines whether you're building wealth or funding someone else's yacht. Today, we're breaking down every major type of debt that exists in the American financial system. The good, the bad, and the genuinely ugly. Because the difference between these categories isn't just academic. It's the difference between retiring at 60 or working until you're 75. Let's start with the debt that's supposed to make you richer. Mortgage debt sits at the top of the respectability hierarchy. It's the debt your parents encouraged, the debt financial advisors don't warn you about, the debt that comes with congratulations instead of concern, and in theory, they're right. A mortgage is what's called secured debt. The bank loans you money, you buy a house, and if you stop paying, the bank takes the house back. Simple exchange, but here's why it's considered good debt. You're borrowing money to buy an asset that historically appreciates. The house, in theory, becomes worth more over time, so you're not just paying off debt, you're building equity. The math looks something like this. You borrow $300,000 at 4% interest over 30 years. Your monthly payment is around $1,400. By the time you've paid it off, you'll have paid roughly $500,000 total. That sounds bad until you realize that house is now worth $600,000 or $700,000 or in certain markets over $1 million. You paid $200,000 in interest but gained $400,000 in value. Net positive, this is why mortgage debt gets labeled good. It's leverage. You're using borrowed money to access an appreciating asset you couldn't afford up front. And while you're paying it down, you're also living in it, which offsets the rent you'd otherwise be paying. But let's not pretend it's perfect. That 30-year timeline matters. In the first decade of a mortgage, the majority of your payment goes to interest, not principal. You're barely building equity. You're mostly paying the bank for access to their money. It takes years before the balance tips and you start actually owning significant portions of your house. And if the market turns, which it does, you can end up underwater. Owing more than the house is worth. At that point, your good debt becomes an anchor. Still, as far as debt goes, this is the safest bet. Low interest rates, long payment terms, tax deductions on the interest in many cases. It's the debt the system is designed to make easy. Now let's move to the middle ground. Student loans sit in an uncomfortable gray zone. They're supposed to be good debt. You're investing in yourself, increasing your earning potential. The same logic as a mortgage, but for your career instead of a house. Except there's no collateral. A bank can't repossess your degree, so the terms are different. Federal student loans hover between 4 and 7% interest depending on when you borrow. Private loans can go higher, and unlike a house, your degree doesn't appreciate. It doesn't increase in value over time. It just sits there, hopefully generating income. The return on investment depends entirely on what you studied and what job you get. Engineering degree, probably worth. Master's in education, the math gets harder. Law degree from a mid-tier school. You might be paying that off until you're 50. Here's the trap. Student loans are nearly impossible to discharge in bankruptcy. They follow you. Even if you're broke, even if the degree didn't lead to the career you expected, the debt remains. The government doesn't care, the bank doesn't care. You signed, you owe. Roughly 43 million Americans currently hold student loan debt. The total sits around $1.7 trillion. That's trillion with a T. The average borrower owes $37,000, but plenty owe 6 figures, and for many of them, the monthly payment is larger than rent. So is it good debt? Only if it works, and for a growing number of people, it. Business loans operate on similar logic. Borrow money to start or grow a business. If the business succeeds, the revenue pays off the loan and then some. If it fails, you're left holding the bill. The difference is risk tolerance. Banks know this. That's why business loans come with higher scrutiny, more paperwork, and often require personal guarantees. They want to make sure that if your business collapses, they can still come after your. The SBA offers government-backed loans with better terms, lower interest, longer repayment periods, but even those aren't free money. You're betting on your own ability to generate. And most small businesses don't make it past 5 years. When business debt works, it's a wealth-building tool. When it doesn't, it's devastating. So that's the good category, debt that theoretically builds assets or debt that has a defendable logic behind it. But even good debt can ruin you if the conditions change. Now let's talk about auto loans are where the logic starts to break down. You're borrowing money to buy a car. That part makes sense. For most Americans, a car is necessary. You need it to get to work, to buy groceries, to exist in a country designed around driving. But here's the problem. A car is a depreciating asset. The moment you drive it off the lot, it loses value. Not a little, a lot. A new car loses roughly 20% of its value in the first year. By year 5, it's worth about 40% of what you paid. So unlike a house, which ideally goes up in value while you're paying it off, a car goes down. You're paying interest on something that's actively becoming worth less. The average auto loan in America right now is just over $38,000. Interest rates vary wildly depending on credit, but they typically sit between 5 and 10%. Payment terms have stretched longer. 48 months used to be standard. Now 60, 72, even 84-month loans are common. That's 7 years to pay off a car that will be worth a fraction of what you paid by the time you own it outright. And here's where it gets worse. Many people trade in before the loan is paid off. They roll the remaining balance into a new loan for a new car. So now they're paying interest on a car they no longer own, plus interest on a car they just bought. This is how you end up owing more than the car is worth, underwater on a depreciating asset. It's the opposite of building wealth, but people do it anyway, because cars are sold on monthly payments, not total price. The dealer doesn't ask if you can afford $40,000. They ask if you can afford $600 a month, and psychologically that feels manageable. It's not. That $600 stretched over 6 years at 7% interest means you're paying $43,000 for a car that's worth $25,000 by the time it's yours. Now, does that mean you shouldn't have a car? No, it means you should be very clear about what you're doing. You're not investing, you're not building equity. You're buying temporary access to transportation and paying a premium for the privilege of spreading the cost over time. Some people mitigate this by buying used, paying cash, avoiding loans altogether. That works if you have the cash, most don't. Auto loans aren't catastrophic, they're just bad math, bad investment, but socially acceptable. Expected even. Now let's go deeper. Personal loans are unsecured debt, no collateral. The bank loans you money based purely on your promise to pay it back, backed by your credit score. If you default, they can sue you, damage your credit, garnish your wages, but they can't take your house or your car unless they win a judgment and force a sale. Because of that risk, personal loans come with higher interest rate. Anywhere from 6% to 36%, depending on your credit. People take personal loans for all kinds of reasons: home renovations, medical bills, debt consolidation, weddings, vacation. Notice what's missing from that list: appreciating assets. You're borrowing money at high interest to pay for things that produce no financial return. A wedding is a one-day event. A vacation is a memory. Medical bills are survival. None of them generate income, none of them build wealth. That's not to say these things don't matter, they do, but borrowing money for them puts you in a hole you'll have to climb out of later, and that interest you're paying. That's money that could have been saved, invested, or used to pay down other debt. Personal loans aren't inherently evil, but they're a symptom of expenses outpacing income, of emergencies with no safety, of wanting things now instead of saving for them later. Which brings us to the category where things stop being bad and start being genuinely dangerous. Credit card debt is a $35 trillion trap dressed up as convenience. Americans currently hold just over $1 trillion in credit card debt. The average household with credit card debt owes around $17,000. But averages hide the extremes. Plenty of people owe $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 or more, and they're paying interest rates that would make a loan shark blush. The average credit card APR right now is over 20%. Some cards go higher, 25, 29%. A few predatory cards aimed at people with bad credit push into the 30s. Let's put that in perspective. If you carry a $10,000 balance at 22% interest and only make the minimum payment, it will take you over 30 years to pay off. And you'll pay more than $23,000 in interest. You'll pay more in interest than you borrowed in the first place. That's not debt. That's indentured servitude with extra steps. Credit cards are revolving debt, meaning there's no end date, no payoff schedule. You borrow, you pay some back, you borrow again. The balance fluctuates, but for many people, it never actually goes to zero. The system is designed that way. Credit card companies don't make money when you pay in full every month. They make money when you carry a balance, when you pay interest, when you miss a payment and get hit with a late fee, when you go over your limit and get hit with an over-limit fee. Every feature of a credit card is engineered to encourage behavior that costs you money. The minimum payment is deliberately low so it feels manageable. But paying only the minimum keeps you trapped in the cycle. The credit limit increases over time, encouraging you to spend more. Rewards programs create the illusion that you're getting something back, even as you hemorrhage money in interest. And the psychological design is brutal. Credit cards don't feel like spending money. They feel like using a tool. Swiping a card is frictionless. There's no pain of handing over cash, no visual reminder of what you're losing. Just a piece of plastic and a signature. Studies show people spend significantly more when they use credit instead of cash, because the psychological brake that stops you from overspending is disabled. You don't feel it until the bill arrives, and by then, you've already spent. But here's what makes credit card debt truly ugly: it compounds. If you don't pay off the full balance, the remaining amount gets added to your principal. Next month, you're paying interest on your original balance plus last month's interest. That's compound interest working against you instead of for you. In a savings account, compound interest is your friend. It grows your wealth. On a credit card, it buries you, and for people who are already struggling, credit cards become a survival tool. They use them for groceries, for gas, for bills, not because they want to, because they have to. And every swipe digs the hole deeper. Payday loans make credit cards look generous. These are short-term loans designed to cover expenses until your next pay. You borrow a few $100s and in 2 weeks you pay it back plus a fee. Seems reasonable until you do the math. The typical fee is $15 per $100 borrowed. So if you borrow $300, you owe $345 in 2 weeks. That 15% fee annualized translates to an APR of nearly 400%. If you can't pay it back in 2 weeks, which most people can't, you roll it over, pay another fee, borrow again. The debt doesn't shrink, it grows. People get trapped in loops where they're perpetually paying fees just to delay repayment, never actually reducing what they. 18 states have banned payday loans outright or capped interest rates so low that payday lenders can't operate. But in the states where they're legal, they thrive. 12 million Americans use payday loans every year. And they're paying on average $520 in fees to borrow $375. It's predatory by design, and it targets people who have no other options. Then there's medical. 66% of bankruptcies in America are tied to medical expenses, not because people are reckless, because they got sick. Medical debt is unique because it's not optional. You don't choose to get hit by a car. You need treatment, and treatment costs money, often more money than you have. Even with insurance, out-of-pocket costs can be staggering. Deductibles, copays, out-of-network surprise. A single hospital stay can generate bills in the tens of thousands, and if you can't pay up front, the hospital sets up a payment plan, which is just a loan by another name, often with interest. Medical debt doesn't build. It doesn't buy an asset, it buys survival, and then it punishes you financially for serving. Roughly 1 in 5 Americans has medical debt in collections. It damages credit scores. It limits access to future. It creates a spiral where financial instability makes it harder to afford healthcare, which creates more medical debt. This is the ugly category: debt that traps you, debt that costs more than it's worth and offers nothing in return except the temporary illusion of So why does this system exist? Because debt is profitable, extraordinarily profitable. The global debt market is worth over $300 trillion. Banks, credit card companies, payday lenders, they're not in the business of helping you. They're in the business of making money off your need. Every percentage point of interest is revenue. Every late fee is profit. Every rolled over payday loan is a win for the lender and a loss for the borrower. And the system is designed to keep you borrowing. Mortgages are encouraged through tax incentives. Student loans are pushed as the only path to a middle-class life. Auto loans are normalized through dealership financing. Credit cards are handed out like candy, sometimes to teenagers who don't understand compound interest. The message is clear: debt is normal, debt is necessary, debt is how you survive in a modern economy. And for many people, it's true. Wages have stagnated for decades while costs have soared. Housing is unaffordable without a mortgage. Education is unaffordable without loans. Medical care is unaffordable without insurance, and sometimes even with it. So people borrow, not because they're irresponsible, because the system has made it nearly impossible to live without debt. But here's the uncomfortable truth: the system benefits from your debt more than you do. That mortgage interest you're paying, it's funding the bank's profits. That credit card balance you're carrying, it's subsidizing rewards programs for people who pay in full every month. That payday loan you took out, it's making someone very wealthy. The math is simple. The more debt you carry, the more interest you pay. The more interest you pay, the less wealth you build. And the less wealth you build, the more likely you are to need debt again in the future. It's a cycle, and it's intentional. So where does that leave you? Debt isn't inherently evil, it's a tool. And like any tool, it can be used well or used poorly. Good debt leverages your future earning potential or gives you access to appreciating assets. Bad debt finances depreciating assets or consumption. Ugly debt traps you in cycles of interest and fees that are nearly impossible to escape. The difference matters, because the decisions you make about debt today will compound over decades. Literally, that $400,000 in lifetime interest we mentioned at the beginning, most of it is avoidable, not all of it, but most. Pay off credit cards every month, buy used cars instead of new. Avoid payday loans entirely, refinance high-interest debt when possible. Understand the terms before you sign. None of that is revolutionary advice, but it's advice that most people don't follow. Because debt is easy to acquire and hard to escape. Because minimum payments feel manageable even when the total balance is crushing. Because the system is designed to make borrowing feel painless until suddenly it's not. The question isn't whether you'll have debt. For most people, the answer is yes. The question is, what kind of debt will you carry and who benefits more from it, you or the person on the other end of the interest payment? Think about that the next time you swipe.